Welcome back to the Step Through, a weekly show about the WNBA, hosted by myself, Sabreena Merchant, alongside Evan Gualberto. We are 2 weeks away from the start of the WNBA playoffs and no closer to figuring out who will be in those last three playoff seeds. But very exciting to watch the league over these last, 4 days since we last recorded. How are you doing, Evan?
I am doing well, not as well as the Aces are per Kelsey Plum's Instagram and the
Mm-hmm.
Myriad. I don't know if I can insert it into the pod because, Crimea River, that stuff. But I'll link to it below if you want to see it. It's awesome. How are you?
I am not doing as well as Becky Hammon, clearly, because she partied her ass off after the Aces won the Commissioner's Cup final convincingly, and now is actually starting to feature in all of these Aces road shenanigans that have been happening truly since the start of the Asia Wilson era, but I've never really seen a coach take part. And now Becky's just feeling loose and, joining in the fun. The Crimea River thing was just delightful. Chelsea Gray just like unable to stay serious, but like still committing to the bit was really good. Chelsea Gray's having a really good week. Commissioner's Cup final MVP cashed an extra $5,000. Got a trophy that was bigger than the combination of Kelsey Plum's two All-Star MVP trophies. Delivered a no-look inbounds behind the back pass. The Aces are one of like two undefeated teams since the last time we recorded. Granted, both games were against the Fever, but really, really convincing wins. They're right up there with the Chicago Sky for potentially being the number one seed in the playoffs. Just everything's coming up. Aces for Las Vegas.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot to add just
No,
because, when you play Indiana twice, like, what can you really say?
true. And the Chicago game, like, I'm kind of on board with Steve Jones Jr., who has said that he's like seen every kind of Aces Sky game already and has no interest in seeing because it does kind of follow the same script each time, right? Like the Aces jump out to a big lead, Chicago starts to figure them out, and do they make enough shots or not? There are plenty of other playoff matchups involving the Aces in the Sky that are very interesting to me. And I mean, they're obviously two very good teams, and if they battled it out in the WNBA finals, like, I'm sure it'd be good basketball, but just the matchup itself, like, I get it. We've seen it.
Yeah, we've seen it a lot. And I mean, even before um Chelsea Gray and Candace Parker went to those
Yeah,
teams.
yeah, when they went to those teams.
Yeah. Yeah, the battles. We talked about those enough. Has anybody else caught your eye this
It
most
seems a
recent
little
stretch?
silly to say after they just got smacked by 20 in New York, but I am enjoying the Phoenix Mercury. Um, Basically, since Tina Charles left, they are like a good basketball team again. And I'm not saying that because Tina Charles is a bad, doesn't seem to fit anything they wanted to do there, both stylistically, personality wise, all of that, you know. And this is essentially just the offense that the Mercury were running in the bubble. We just have a point guard who's going to push the pace. Bri Turner is going to attract some attention by rolling. And we have shooters all around and just play fast, play loose, spread the floor as much as possible. And Skylar Diggins and Dana Taurasi are just going to make some ridiculous shots sometimes. And some days they don't make shots and it looks really ugly, but most of the time they're pretty good players. And I'm enjoying the formula. Sophie Cunningham has been outstanding of late. Uh, had just an iconic halftime interview with Cindy Brunson the other day, which I will never forget about when thinking about Sophie Cunningham ever again. But I mean, holding up a power forward, doing just a decent enough job of doing her work early, preventing bigs from sealing her and getting deep post position. And then she's just been raining threes. So Phoenix is just like very aesthetically pleasing to watch. Like they're not doing anything difficult, like schematically wise, but they just get a lot of really good shots up and they make a lot of them, which is again pleasing to watch.
Yeah, and we very recently had the Brondello off.
Is that a
How
thing? Yeah.
I
They had one in Phoenix already, which Phoenix did win.
right. So I guess it's just a matter of who's at home, right?
Yeah.
For who wins these games.
When you said Brondello off, actually, I was thinking of when New York went to Chicago and Sandy had to watch Olaf get his ring.
Steph Dolson was the best part of that. I found an interesting. Well, I discovered it earlier on in the season and I told you about it, but it's not something I've managed to like work into the podcast at any point. You already know the answer to this, so there's no point in like asking you. But at the time of this recording, Skylar Diggins-Smith has 26 blocks on the season. So if you exclude, traditional 4s and 5s, Brianna Stewart, Ezzy McGregor, Asia Wilson, Queen Egbo is up there.
We love Queen Egbo.
Yeah. Excluding those, the 4s and 5s, Emily Engstler has 35, and then no other guard. I don't consider Emily Engstler a guard, but she's not a 4 or 5 to me. So
Okay.
Skylar Diggins-Smith has 26, and like right above her, Candace Parker has 27, Sylvia Fowles has 28. Sometimes it's up to the home book scorekeeper, whatever, to classify if something is a steal or a block. Sometimes, yeah, 3 or 4 of them are like strip swipe downs, but the rest of them are legitimate low man rotating over, getting up. Most recently, she had one against Natasha Howard where she covered so much ground. Natasha Howard hard roll and she obliterated that shot with her weak hand, which is
her right hand, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
More Skylar Diggins-Smith love. I mean, she birthday soon. I don't know that I'll be able to get this podcast out by then, but I know it's in early August.
Yeah, are you and Skylar like exactly the same age now that I think about it?
I don't want to comment.
No, Skylar, I think, I don't know if it's a consequence of like us doing this podcast or just the fact that I've really like dug into the film of the WNBA more over the last 2 seasons, but like she just impresses me more and more like every time I watch her, because like I've talked about this with you ad nauseum, just how much I love people who run the floor in transition, and no guard runs the floor in transition better than Skylar's, and her finishes in transition are just impeccable. Like the fact that she can finish with either hand now, she's not completely left-handed dominant, which is just a descriptor that seems to follow left-handed players more than right-handed players. She's got just incredible intensity when it comes to picking up her teammates, picking up the crowd. Obviously, the refs saw too much of it when they played the Sparks last week, leading to the first ever ejection of Skylar Diggins-Smith's career. But hey, they still won the game, and she had, 27 points, more points than minutes played. She just does a little bit of everything. Like, I know the 3 ball is not falling this year, but she puts so much pressure on defenses just with her constant attacking, constant movement. She gets everybody organized. She is a menace defensively, like you mentioned with the blocks. And she also just seems like hella annoying to play against, which I imagine is why like the player voting did not go her way for All-Star. Just a supremely impressive player. And considering all that she has to do to lift Phoenix, because of all of the inconsistencies they've had, like Sophie Cunningham had the elbow injury, Taurasi just wasn't shooting the ball for the first month of the season. Well, obviously the Brittany Griner situation, Tina Charles didn't work out. They're relying on Jenny Sims and Sam Thomas for real minutes. Like, it's a lot. It's a lot going on there. And the fact that they are a positive point differential team since Tina Charles left with that roster is kind of a miracle. And I give the majority of the credit to Skylar.
Yeah, I mean, if you just counting stats, like we're recording this August 1st. Time of this recording, she is 3rd in the league in scoring, just behind Kelsey Plum. Kelsey at 20.3, Skylar at 20 flat. I mean, she's also in the top 10 in assists. Also
and
steals. Yeah.
Yep.
And I mean, I think if you have to round up to get her to 1 block a game, but it's effectively 1 block a game. So she might be in the top 20. Outstanding player. Since we haven't mentioned it in a while, Notre Dame. Yeah. It seems like there can't be more to say than we've already said about Skylar Diggins-Smith, but like every week she just finds a new way to have us work her into the podcast somehow.
Yeah. And I'm just impressed that even like she's turning 32 this week, she just keeps getting better and better. Like every season in Phoenix, it feels like she's added a little something to her game, which she was already a first team all WNBA type player when she was in Dallas. So to improve upon that baseline is very, very impressive. I remember talking to her at the end of last season, and she realized just how much higher the level was in the playoffs than she expected, having never been on a real playoff run up until that point. And I know that that's the next area where she'd like to prove herself. I'm not sure if the Mercury are going to get that opportunity, but Like if you put the Mercury against Seattle in a 3-game series, I'm not sure I'd be surprised if the Mercury won that.
Well, as we found,
Kevin Pelton said that the teams that have swept Seattle in the last 3 seasons have all made the finals. So that means that this year's WNBA finalists would be Connecticut and Phoenix.
I'd be down for that. It'd be,
How
crazier thing.
wild is it that Connecticut has gone from just not having any idea of what to do with Seattle to sweeping them this year?
Well, I think a lot of that has to do with, and well, you can give it away now. The Storm are for the 3rd episode in a row, our game of the week.
Is it really 3rd? What was the one before Storm Sky?
Storm Dream, and then we took that
yeah,
hiatus. Yeah. We've been talking a lot about the Storm.
they're just
but
involved in a lot of good games.
Yes. So, Connecticut, very, very surprising. They had 2 games this week, one against the Storm, and then the other one's against the Sky without Candace Parker. Both really great games.
Mm-hmm.
And does Sun do this thing where for most of it, I feel very confident now having watched the Sun with this particular group, and I kind of have a feel for what Kurt Miller seems to want to do.
Mm-hmm.
When they introduce new stuff, it's exciting to me, but I feel like it's always the same. I feel like I know what's going to happen. I feel like I know what plays are going to run, X, Y, and Z. And then they get into these close games where it looks like everything goes out the window. And I am so angry.
It's a really heavy diet of Courtney Williams and DeWanna Bonner jump shots.
Speaking of, DeWanna Bonner almost had a step through 3-pointer that would have led the show had she made it. But why was that the shot that we ended with? Anyway.
It's probably better than a Sparks possession yesterday when they were down by 5 with 40 seconds to play, where they passed the ball around for 20 seconds and Jordan Canada pumped fake to 3. I think I'd take a DeWanna Bonner step through over that.
Yeah, that was awesome. We were talking as the game was going on, which is rare for a Sparks game, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. Usually try to find me in a better mood than during Sparks games. But back to the Mercury. They are the team among this morass of 6 teams competing for the last 3 playoff spots that intrigues me the most. Just because I know they have players who can live up to big moments, and they just have institutional knowledge of how to get things done in the playoffs. And even though, we'll talk a little bit about Coach of the Year, I guess. I'm not sure what Vanessa Nygaard's doing, honestly, but like their system makes sense to me. Like I think they're optimizing their players to the best of their abilities, and maybe they don't have as much talent as some of these other groups, but the flow makes sense. And that's not something that I can say about a lot of the other teams, even the ones that are ahead of them in the WNBA standings.
Yeah, it very much looks like they are finding their groove. And I guess Bri Turner is the full-time 5, right?
Yeah.
And it's just, if you had told me that at the start of the season, well, I would have been surprised because Tina Charles was still on the team. But how? You know what I mean? It's like,
she did it during the bubble too. Like it's just a more NBA style way of playing, I think.
Yeah, that's
with
true.
One lone big and a lot of spacing around them. And, there's a lot more front court offense in the W. Like you and I had discussed this with the list of the top 10 players on the Double Down podcast, how so many of them are power forwards. And it's like in the NBA, that was the case 20 years ago. And then the idea of the power forward sort of like disappeared. That type of player disappeared. But that's like the age that we're in with the W, where all of these 4s are dominating the game offensively and defensively. But that just means you have to play with 2 bigs all the time. And Phoenix is just saying, all right, we're just going to have Sophie do her very best on a lot of much bigger players. And if that means that she has to battle with Jonquel Jones one day, like so be it. And sometimes it's going to work because, again, 3s are more than 2s, but you could also just get bullied around a little bit. And that happens to Phoenix too.
Yeah. Not a lot more to say. Oh, I guess the best way to pivot right now is, in case anybody is confused as to the playoff format, could you explain it for our audience?
Yeah. So the WNBA changed its playoff format in 2016 to eliminate conferences and just put the top 8 teams in the postseason. But then they had a series of buys and like various like there was a single buy and a double buy that like meant that there were delays on each team entering the postseason. Now the top 8, regardless of conference, still make the playoffs, but all 8 are going to play in the first round, and it's going to be a pretty standard 1v8, 2-7, 3-6, 4-5. The first round is all 3-game series with the home team or the higher seed hosting the first 2. And then, if necessary, the deciding game would be hosted by the lower seed, which is a very interesting wrinkle if you're a higher seed who gets stuck having to play a decisive game 3 on the road. But I mean, really, you should just take care of your own business at home. It's a nice little inversion of how the WNBA used to do the playoffs in the early 2000s, where it was still 3-game sets, but the lower seed would host the first game and then go to the higher seeds building for the final 2. I distinctly remember in the Sparks 2004 playoff run, they won every single home game and lost every single road game. And it was really exciting in the WNBA finals when they went up 1-0 and then proceeded to lose 2 in Detroit. A team that Vanessa Nygaard was actually on and was speaking about the other day. But that's neither here nor there. We have 5 teams who've already clinched playoff spots. The class of the W this year, we've got Chicago, Vegas, Connecticut, Seattle, and Washington. And 3 spots that I believe could be up in the air until the final day of the regular season on August 14th. And then the Indiana Fever. Sorry. Best of luck to Kelsey Mitchell. And congratulations to Victoria Vivians, who just got engaged to Tierra from Pratt, a former member of the Mystics and the Sparks. But yeah, 6 teams competing for 3 spots. If you look at the 538 playoff odds, those 6 teams are basically between like a 35 and 85% chance each individually of making the playoffs. And those odds like fluctuate by the game. I mean, the Sparks, I think, fell about 12% yesterday after losing to the Lynx. So there's some volatility there. If you just had to make a, snap decision right now, Evan, of which 3 teams you think are going to make the playoffs, where would you land?
Oh, okay. Well, it seems silly to me to have talked that much about the Mercury and not have like some level of belief in them. So,
I
like,
would agree.
yeah, I would pencil that in. They're just one of those teams that, similar to last year with Minnesota, it seems like they have a higher floor than most of the other teams, but a much lower ceiling. So, yeah, I think with their ability to punch up. And then at this point, like, I don't know because the Liberty on paper seem like they could be the deepest team of the rest of the field.
Deeper than Dallas?
Well, players that
Sorry,
play.
that was way too easy of a lob.
Players that play. But I think I mean, the dream they keep suffering these injuries, right? AD Durr now out for the rest of the season, and they contributed a level of like force defensively and 3-point shooting, and obviously,
I love that backcourt with them and Ari McDonald coming off the bench. It's just like pesky.
Yeah, but you take just a little bit of that away, and it's that takes a hit, and at the time of this recording, I believe they've lost 4 straight at this point.
Christy Wallace Hype is coming for you, Evan.
Yeah, I am rooting for the dream, but I just, things continue to make me think that like they're just not going to end up with it.
Just to add on to that, it doesn't seem to me like the Dream's organizational priority is to make the playoffs. Like they own their own lottery pick. First round pick. It's not to say that it's going to be a lottery pick, but they own their own first round pick. If it gets into the lottery and they have a chance to select a player like Aaliyah Boston or Haley Jones or, a junior who decides to go pro, it just makes more sense to continue to build that core with McDonald and Durr and Howard and Hillman than try to go into the playoffs where I like the Dream, but I'm not sure I see their upside as much as a team like the Mercury who can just rain threes on you and like put you in a hole in a hurry.
I guess the only ones left to talk about are the Wings who, on paper, like I'd be willing to, right now they sit with the least amount of losses of the rest of the field. Yeah, so there's that.
So much enthusiasm. The Wings have broken us, legitimately.
They have, yeah.
If
So
I
I
had to
guess
pick three, are you going to actually answer, Evan? Or
yes. I don't have to pick the order, right? I
no?
just have to pick the three. Okay.
Just
Just
three.
I'll take the Wings, the Mercury, and oh my lord, the Lynx.
Okay, I was going to go Wings, Mercury, Liberty,
Okay.
just because the Liberty have the most games left against other teams in this range.
Okay.
And just have the opportunity to control their own destiny in a really powerful way. They also host the Sparks for 2 games this week, which I think is a nice way to get into a little bit of a rhythm. I'm interested in the Lynx. Like, I think they might be the second best team out of these 6 behind Phoenix. But just having talked to Cheryl Reeve yesterday, she made it sound like they were okay with the end of Sylvia Fowles' career being a natural inflection point in their franchise, like for rebuilds, and didn't sound too disappointed by the fact that they could end up in the lottery. I'm not trying to like dig into her words or anything. It just the way she answered that question, she just says things come when they come, and like when the band broke up in 2018 with Maya Moore and Becca Brunson, Lindsay Whalen all leaving the team. Like they still managed to stay competitive because they had the opportunity to draft Nafisa Collier. But the drafts haven't been particularly kind to them in the last 2 years. Frankly, they haven't been very kind to most teams in the WNBA. But this is an opportunity for really impactful draft, and I don't think they're rushing feedback. Like their team is good, but they're lacking a number 1 scoring option, and it just seems to me like, again, organizational priority wise, they wouldn't be devastated if the season ended up out of the playoffs.
The Lynx were more of a sentimental pick for me, just because I can watch Cheryl Reeve coach anybody at any time.
Yeah.
Just outstanding work. I agree with you. The Liberty, like I said, like I already said, like the most depth. I would love to see them fully healthy. Yeah, it's funny
that Benai Shalani came back for the playoffs.
Jocelyn Willoughby just would add another dimension to the team that they have kind of sort of been lacking. If we assume that the Chicago Sky are going to finish with the best record, which that's not a sure
not
thing.
Set in stone, but yeah.
But which of these
number 1?
Which of these teams would you like to see play the Sky and could give them the
Liberty. The Liberty for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the Lynx did beat the Sky, but that was in I don't know, there was this moment where the Lynx felt like they were just playing out of body, and they're still good now. Don't get me wrong. Like it's still a competent basketball team, but I don't think they're quite at that peak anymore, if that's fair.
Yeah, I think it is. The Lynx on their best day have beaten the 2 best teams in the W. Do they have a win against the Sun at this point?
I don't know, but the Liberty have wins against all 3 of those teams. I'm just saying.
All right. Yeah.
But have they swept the storm? That is the real question.
That's true. Okay, so I don't know if it's mathematically possible now for the Wings to get to anything higher than 6, right? But
yeah, I don't think so.
I guess
it's possible. It's just highly unlikely.
Okay. Yeah. Throw likeliness out the window. Who would you like to see the Wings see in a series?
The lottery. I'm not interested in watching the Wings in the playoffs.
Okay.
We did this as game of the week earlier in the year. Wings Sun is interesting to me. The Wings honestly do play the Sky fairly well. They haven't been able to turn that into wins, but they've been competitive against them. Not the Mystics, not the Storm,
not the Aces.
I would say Sky or Sky. Yeah, that's the one. Wings Sky. I guess the Wings could be the 8 seed. That's not impossible. They're right there with everybody else.
Yeah. Well, that would be something, I guess. As long as it's as long as it's not the Aces.
Who do you think could actually give the Aces some trouble in the first round? Or is the answer no?
The answer was no. No, I mean, I think it would be very interesting to see the Mercury get into a firefight with the Aces. I don't think it would go well for the Mercury, but
What's we thought last year?
yeah, I was gonna say, some measure of what is it? The to exercise playoff ghosts, as it were,
Mm-hmm.
for the Aces. Yeah, I just think it would be interesting. I would love to see the Dream end up against the Aces, just because Cheyenne Parker has played Asia Wilson about as well as like anybody can in a one-on-one matchup. I'm not saying, she played her to a standstill, but I'm saying that is a fun matchup to watch by itself. And then you have Tiffany Hayes and Aaron McDonald and all of this like aggression on both
Big
ends.
Tiffany Hayes fans.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we could just wait for it to play out. It's only 2 weeks away, but should we talk about our games of the week, Evan?
Absolutely.
All right, so in classic step through fashion, we picked a doubleheader because we love to talk about two games when we could only talk about one. Storm were in Washington. It's confusing. The Storm were in DC for a 2-game set against the Mystics on Saturday and Sunday. They split it, but that means that the Storm own the tiebreaker for potential playoff seeding, which could come in handy considering their schedule going forward is tricky. We divvied this up. I got the first game that the Storm won, and you took the second one that the Mystics won. And I guess I just wanted to start off by talking about a player that somehow we don't mention a lot for how often we talk about Seattle, and that is one Jewell Loyd, who really lived up to her Gold Mamba nickname with her clutch performances in this game against the Mystics. It looked like Seattle wasn't going to need a heavy diet of blown shot making at the end, considering that they built a double-digit lead with their bench. We will get back to that, I promise. As long as the Seattle bench is actually playing well, I'm going to give them credit. But Jewell just had a series of really, really big shots. She hit a 3 over Elena Deladon to put the team up 13 with about 4 minutes left. This is when she's trying to get the ball into Brianna Stewart on a switch in the post, but just can't quite find the angle, and then just decides to cash in a 3 over maybe the best defender on the Mystics. That's a question to be had. Then, with about 1:42 left, the Mystics have gone on this run. They've cut it to, I think, 5 points at this point, and they've got an after timeout play. It looks like something is happening action-wise, but the ball ends up with Jewell Loyd on the baseline, who just left to right crossover, jumper over Natasha Cloud. Beautiful stuff. And then the ensuing possession, she curls off of Tina Charles and has a nice little lefty layup finish over Shakira Austin, which may be the best defender on the Mystics. I don't know. We can, again, have that question, but just a lot of really big time baskets for Jewell Loyd at the end of this game. It's funny because you'd think at the end of most games you want to put the ball in Stewie's hands or you want to put the ball in Sue Bird's hands and have her make those decisions. But the Mystics do such a good job of cutting off your primary options. And that one-on-one matchup with Stewie and Elena Deladon was so challenging for Stewie in this game. She was just not able to power at her like she traditionally is in most games. That to have this safety valve of Jewell Loyd who can make these shots, just an overqualified safety valve, to be perfectly honest, and who can win her matchup against whether that's Natasha Cloud or Errol Atkins, such a luxury. She was so critical offensively in this game and defensively, just the work that she had to do on Errol Atkins. Really impressive stuff from Jewell.
Yeah, just a quick production note, I guess, in case anybody gets confused, because they are two Mystics home games. The Sabreena's game, the game on the 30th, the Mystics are rocking their red
jerseys.
Yeah. And for my game, they are rocking their, I guess, Rebel. It's the
Rise
blue
jerseys.
Oh yeah, the Rise. Excuse me. Yeah, the with the pink stripe.
Okay, they're definitely called the Rebel jerseys, and they say Rise on the front. That is the Sunday game. Yeah.
All right, I'm good with that. If in doubt, the ESPN production has the floor much brighter than
Amazon. Okay.
Yeah, which is not surprising. I have strong feelings, but for another time. Speaking of Jewell Loyd, she was sensational this game too. For my game, much more impactful defensively than offensively, although offensively she hit a couple of tough shots. She was feeling, I guess, still swaggy over the last game. she hit this
Mm-hmm.
one sidestep, step back over Elena Deladon on a switch, pick and roll with Stewie. Elena came off and she had a hand right in her face. And it was just, yeah, this is what Jewell Loyd does. But defensively, she made her presence very felt this game, not just the 4 steals, but just harassing, pestering. There was this one possession I'm thinking about. She doesn't have any blocks recorded, but there was one where she went to double Elena early in the second half on an Elena post up on Stewie, and I think she got the block, but doesn't get credit for it. But yeah, and early on in the game, it kind of looked like she was gonna pick up where she left off. Honestly, I think the first or second score by the Storm was a 2-person game between Jewell and Stewie, give and go, and then another give and go. And then Jewell finished over the rotating Ariel Atkins, who, I mean, we can get into the Mystics later, and I will talk quite a bit about the Mystics defense. That's going to be my breakdown at the end. Ariel Atkins and Jewell Loyd, what a terrific matchup to watch.
So much fun. So great in my game too. Where Ariel had to bust out like all of the footwork possible just to get a smidgen of space against Jewell. And then she manages to get this like baseline leaning jumper over her, which again, I do not fault Jewell Loyd for the defense on that at all. Like you make a fellow Olympian work and you've done your job. But watching the two of them go at each other, it's like such a treat to get that and Stewie Deladon in the same game. Like, I mean, I know that this seems like an overqualified first round matchup, but boy, would it be fun.
Yeah, and I mean, the last episode, you kind of wondered why I felt like Subird's final game in DC was of any significance is because the first WNBA finals game that I watched was actually here's they did not play in either of the arenas that they have now. They played at George Mason University's stadium because
construction, I think, was
construction
happening too.
Yeah. So the only WNBA finals game I have ever seen in person was a rout by the Storm. Just the 2-person game of Subert and Brianna Stewart just running roughshod on the Mystics at that point, who had a great revenge season the next season. But yeah.
Yeah, the 2018 Storm were something special. I don't know. I don't want to make like grand pronouncements, but I think they're the most dominant team of the last 7 or 8 years. I know a lot of Minnesota Lynx fans would quibble with that, but that individual season was something else. And to think they almost lost in the WNBA semifinals to Phoenix that year.
Yeah, they just looked.
I've never seen a WNBA finals game in person. I'm gonna have to travel to make that happen.
Well, if the Sparks keep going the way they're going, you never will.
Maybe the Mystics will get Aaliyah Boston next year.
Oh, that'd be nice. I'd like that. I'd like that very much. Yeah, but just the matchups, obviously, Elena and Stewie, Ariel and Jewell. Natasha Cloud was just, in my game, was just bringing it. I mean, Natasha Cloud never stops bringing it on either end. She's just a force, and she will tell you she deserves to be all defense. She all-star, a shooter, all of these things. But yeah, it was just the Mystics just have so much. And I told you this while I was watching it. It's going to be hard to like lay the video on top of each other, but it kind of felt the two teams were so similar and their offenses looked very similar as well, to the point where on multiple possessions, the Storm ran one set and the Mystics ran the same set, like down the other end. There were a number of possessions, and every team runs pistol. Spain, the stack pick and roll, like one team ran it, the Storm ran it first, and then the Mystics came right down as if Mike Thibault was saying, I can one up this. Yeah.
Just holistically, these teams remind me a lot of each other too, with their dominant player at the 4. They have just stifling defense. And their offense, which in recent years has been supremely pretty and just flows wonderfully, has lacked a little bit of that just vibe this year. Like the Storm often look like they're stuck in the mud offensively, and the Mystics go through these stretches where they're like no pass possessions for some reason, and their spacing is all out of whack, and Maisha Hines-Allen is trying to drive her way into a crowd when the entire defense is collapsed into the paint. Like, I'm not trying to like blame Maisha Hines-Allen. I'm just saying like the Mystics haven't quite figured out what they look like offensively all the time, which is very similar to Seattle, which is again why I think the synchronicity of like how well they match up with one another plays out, and just like the way they want to play. But I want to talk about that EDD Stewie matchup just a little bit because, I mean, why not? Like, we've been waiting to see it since you attended the WNBA finals, and just have been denied that opportunity. But there was this sequence in the second quarter where Brianna Stewart just had these like increasingly difficult closeouts on Elena. And she would just like have to jump at her and like land off to the side so that she didn't get caught for the foul. And it was like 3 possessions in a row. The first one, Stewie jumps at her at the 3-point line, somehow manages to get back down, even though Elena had a pump fake without fouling her, doesn't fall behind the play. The next possession, Stewie has a similarly effective closeout and actually forces a turnover when Elena tries to pass out of it. And then the third, like in that sequence, Elena finally figures it out and draws 3 free throws by getting Stewie to jump on her pump fake at the 3-point line. But it's just so funny watching the two of them work because like potentially the 2 most singularly dominant forces in this game, 2 of the 3 with A'ja Wilson, and just like watching Elena process, like, okay, this is how Brianna's coming at me. Like if I try to pump this way, like she's going to close out this way. But I don't know, it's just interesting to watch like the evolution of EDD. Like, okay, this is how I'm going to get you.
For my game, the Mystics, it felt comfortable for the most part. Going into the fourth quarter, they were up by, I think, 7 or 8. And then that's how the game mostly went until about 5 minutes left to play. Subert got a pick and got a layup and cut it to 67-68. But that's as close as it got. They came within 2 multiple times, but yeah, it was just a back and forth. But to me, the dagger was Elena semi-transition. She went at Tina Charles. Sue came over to double and she spun to split it. Tina had 2 hands up to contest, and Elena sort of like with this hang and hit adjust across her body shot to put the game away. It was just like, yeah, this is Elena Delle Donne. And I mean, Brianna Stewart, it's tough to say that she struggled, but yeah, she went 9 for 12. I would say that she probably could have had way more shots, but just she had a hand in her face on almost all of these shots. Many were movement shots where she'd pick and pop, and she doesn't even look like her feet are set, and she's shooting a 3 over Elena. I don't even know what you know.
I would say that she struggled a little bit in my game. She still ended up with more points than shot attempts, and that's because she got to the line quite a bit because she was absolutely punishing these switches. Every time a small got onto her, it was immediate seal, get the ball in. Someone has to foul me because otherwise I'm going right over the top of your head. But every time that she had to attack Elena one-on-one, she couldn't just like power through her because Elena would block her. She had 4 blocks, so a couple of those came on Tina Charles as well. And she had to get a little more creative. Like you saw her bust out this hook shot and like a little floater because she had to just create a little bit more space than usual, considering just the type of defender Elena is. And I mean, if you're going to make Brianna Stewart get more creative and show us more tricks that she has, like, I'm all for it. So it was great to watch, but it was interesting to see her have to, again, adjust to this excellent defensive presence that was placed in front of her.
We'll talk about the Seattle bench later, but how did Tina Charles play in your game?
I thought Tina was quite good, actually. She, first possession of the game, she goes right at Elena Delle Donne, gets stuffed, and it seems like a terrible way to start the game, contrary to what the announcers might have said. But she figured it out pretty quickly and was like, okay, I'm not going to directly attack EDD one-on-one. Like if Shakira is my matchup, I think I have the capability to go past her, especially Tina would set up like on the perimeter and just sort of like pump and go past Shakira. And then she even was able to post up around her because even though Austin's an excellent defender, like she's still a rookie, and Tina Charles has just a litany of post moves that are going to get some people in a blender. Like it's just a problem. So that matchup she attacked, she was really decisive attacking the bench centers, whether that was Elizabeth Williams or Maisha Hines-Allen, whoever happened to be on her, like just had no fear attacking those bigs. And I mean, it kind of goes into the whole bench situation, but the Tina Charles bench plus bench lineups finally made sense to me today in this game. And that is why I'm unconvinced of Seattle's sustainability in this matchup, because I don't think that's going to on a long-term basis. I mean, regular viewers of this show, people who follow me on Twitter, Evan, who texts me on the reg, know how much I hate the Seattle bench lineups. Just with a fire, like I clock how long they play together, just like out of principle. I mean, I don't do that with any other set of lineups. I just need to know what's happening with this particular group. But I mean, Tina like was running some pick and roll with Brianna January, just really comfortable with all of those bench defensive situations. I thought this was a really good game for her. I mean, what's telling is that she's still finished with a negative plus minus compared to Ezzy Magmagore's plus 10. And I think like a lot of the decisive sequences happened with Ezzy at center instead of Tina. Like the stretch that really broke the game open was the start of the fourth quarter when it was Tina plus this bench to start, but then Noelle Quinn quickly brought in Stewie. So it was Stewie plus the bench for an extended period. And that was the group that really broke the game open. But the fact that they were able to just at least tread water with the regular bench lineup, which was almost entirely Tina Charles and some fantastic Epiphany Prince perimeter steals, that I give a lot of credit to Tina because like those lineups have just been hemorrhaging points, and the fact that she was able to hold the fort there. And she actually had this one really good transition defense sequence in the first quarter where I literally just wrote, oh, Tina Charles transition defense, cool.
I asked because the shots she was taking this game felt more in the flow of the offense, but there were times where it felt like it was, okay, well, I have the ball now. I'm taking it. Like maybe it was a byproduct of the Mystics defense, which was terrific in my game, especially, but 4 for 9 on the game and a bunch where she just took a couple of contested 3-pointers over Shakira Austin. And, you know, when those drop, yeah, Tina Charles looks great. But when they don't, I mean, it doesn't look good. So I guess your game broke the streak. My game continues the streak of game of the weeks where Tina Charles does not look good in the Seattle offense. But
Can I talk about the bench a little bit? Just
yeah.
So this was the first game that I've watched where I actually understood what the bench was trying to run. Like, so it was some pick and roll, which is a little dicey because Lord knows I've mentioned the passes that Brianna January can throw. Some of them were just wild. I don't want to like just clown on Brianna January. That's not the purpose of this here. But like there was some of that. There was a lot of just let Tina Charles seal, Maisha or Elizabeth Williams and let her work. And then the bench was really aided by Stephanie Talbot having an awesome, awesome game. Now, obviously, you think of Stephanie Talbot, like the first thing you think of is probably her shooting, right? But that hasn't really been the case in Seattle this year. Ever since she came back from COVID, like the jump shot just hasn't really been there for her. But she's been really good at just moving off the ball and trying to get some flow going in the bench. And I thought what she did really well in this game was just her passing. She had this one, like just really quick post up and then kick out to Brianna January in the corner to start the second quarter. Then she has this drive like a couple minutes later where she hits a cutting Jewel Lloyd to the basket. She had another really nice pass in transition to Tina Charles. There was this other kick out that she had to Ezzy Magmagore that Ezzy ends up missing the 3, but just another nice look created. I thought it was really telling that Gabby Williams only played 18 minutes in my game because Steph was so good that they realized the combination that they wanted around the big 3 was Steph plus another big, whether that was Tina or Ezzy, for large stretches. But we had discussed this last week of whether Steph gives you enough defensively to, make up for that Gabby Williams discrepancy, because she's obviously going to provide more for you on offense. And she just provided so much on offense this game that like the fact that she was also going up against these Washington bench lineups where unfortunately there's just not a lot of offensive flow happening. Like she was able to hold her own perfectly fine. I thought she was like quietly the most important player, even though Ezzy was awesome too. I mean, she ends up making like the game-saving defensive play by defending Elena Deladon on the final possession. But this is maybe the best I've seen Steph Talbot like fit into what the Storm were trying to do all year. And the fact that she got like, the nod to play with the actual big 3 is like a glowing endorsement of her play, because to get more minutes than the starter is just not something that happens a lot in an Noelle Quinn minutes management system.
Well, I wish there was some Steph Talbot stuff to talk about in my game, but there just wasn't. And I mean, if she played a factor in the first game, it doesn't surprise me at all that Mike Thibault adjusted and took her out of the second game. She only played 13 minutes in the second game, did not account for very many things. I think one of her 2 assists was on a scramble play where it was a deflection. She was just the closest person around, and it was the easiest pass to make. So not a lot of proactive playmaking. And in terms of the Seattle bench, this game, I may be mistaken here, but from what I can recall, I don't believe the bench played without one of Stewie or Jewel. So Noel Quinn, if you're watching this, please bring back the cool outfits in away games. But the closer we get to the playoffs, the hopefully more we see these bench units anchored by one of their primary shot creators, because we've talked about this a lot already. Sometimes it just doesn't, when it works great, but a lot of the times I feel like against good teams,
don't think you can rely on Steph Talbot to make that kind of impact every game, which clearly was the case immediately after her standout performance.
How's Ezi Magbegor in your game?
Outstanding. Absolutely outstanding.
Okay.
Just defensively was swallowing things up at the rim. There was one time where she got caught on an island against Elena Delle Donne. That did not go very well for her, but at the basket things were going very well for Ezi. And again, I don't expect things to go well for you on an island against Elena Delle Donne. That's not a position that anyone really wants to be in. But that stretch that I spoke about earlier with Stewie plus the bench was just Ezi's crowning moment, which, Ezi playing next to Stewie, who would have known that was going to go well? Just did a really good job of playing pick and roll with Stewie. Why not let Stewie be the ball handler in these situations, right? If she can't go one-on-one with Elena Delle Donne, then let's create some mismatches. And Ezi was really good at attacking those mismatches, just good on the offensive glass, finishing everything around the rim. And then, like I mentioned earlier, Washington is down by 1. They get the ball because of this horrific timeout situation at the end of the game where Seattle doesn't call timeout, but the refs called it for them anyway. And then they have to inbound the ball at half court and end up turning it over. So Washington gets the ball back. They give it to Elena. She goes right at Ezi, who just keeps her arms up and causes a miss. And that's basically the game. Yeah, really outstanding performance from Magbegor. I've been a little wishy-washy on how she's been off the bench. It just hasn't had the same effectiveness to me ever since she came off the bench. And by the looks of it, that was the case in your game. But yeah, I still think that she should be starting. I maintain that the best 4 that the Seattle Storm can put out there are the big 3 plus Ezi. Whether you want to put Talbot or Gabby Williams or, even Breon January, if teams are a little bit smaller, in that 3rd spot, that's fine. But she has got to be playing with the starters. The identity of this team is defense. And if you're going to willingly compromise that in your starting lineup, it just doesn't make any sense to me. She was on track for this most improved defensive player of the year type season, and to just be hey, Tina Charles is going to take your spot when she's been fine is a weird choice.
Yeah, yeah. As I told you and whoever was willing to listen to me when the Storm acquired Tina Charles, is my singular concern is not necessarily bumping Ezi out of the starting lineup, which did end up happening anyway. That's what I thought wouldn't happen, but that Tina would overtake Ezi in terms of minutes played. Mm-hmm. That was my principal concern. It just takes away, because this is not throw Tina Charles under the bus.
We can do that. It's fine.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, yeah. We're the Phoenix Mercury.
We're Sophie Cunningham.
Yeah. It's just that what Ezi provides defensively, I think that, as you've said, defensive player of the year consideration for Ezi Magbegor.
Mm-hmm.
Defensively, there's no question, I don't think. And Tina Charles, 100%. one of the game's great players, one of the game's great scorers. At this point in Tina's career, she's not the hard roller that I think a team like Seattle needs, because Ezi, the effort, intensity, and energy are always there, whether the productiveness is not. And sometimes it feels like what Tina brings to the table is tethered to her offensive production. So one of the things that I really enjoyed at the beginning of the season is when they would run these 4 or 5 pick and rolls between Stewie and Ezzy. And, Stewie has her choice of, is she pulling from deep? Is she getting to the basket? But because Ezzy is rolling, or occasionally Ezzy would pop, I can't tell you how many threes Ezzy has on the season, but I know that early on, it could be argued that like the 1 or 2 that she would take, she would be, maybe defenses are willing to live with it, but you have to have a willingness to take those shots if you're going to pop. But the pop makes the roll much more effective, makes the slip more effective. And I just don't see Tina bringing that level of dynamism in her screen setting. And, you take that away, and I do feel like the Storm have lost a little piece of the explosiveness they've had offensively. Just because it's not just the offense you're sacrificing. When Tina is out there on the floor instead of Ezzy, there's that too. So, there's those things you have to weigh. And I don't know. It seems like such a waste to have had a player who I think she had a legitimate case for All-Star, and suddenly, now she's not in the running for any of, maybe she is in the running for these awards, but she has less of a strong case than she did.
Yeah. The media who get to vote on these awards are definitely having a tougher consideration, as Rebecca Lobo and Ryan Rucco learned during the broadcast on Saturday. But hey, it is what it is. I just wanted to bring up Alicia Clark real quick. Her learning in real time the challenges of defending her former teammates. Like, I'm sure she knew of them, but like watching her have to deal with them was so funny to me. Like, she is going, for a 3 and it seems open, and then all of a sudden, like, Brianna Stewart comes out to contest it, and it just completely like throws Alicia Clark off because the 7'1" wingspan of Brianna Stewart is coming at her. And the best part about it was like you could see Clark just cracking up after all of these plays, like knowing that, oh yeah, this is what this is like. Like she got a couple of her, trademark seals in the post, and then her ridiculous little hooks out of those. One of my favorite Alicia Clark things. My favorite was one possession. She did that to Sue Bird, and then immediately Gabby Williams comes down and does the same thing to her, except Gabby Williams not quite as efficient around the rim as one Alicia Clark. Probably why Steph Talbot got to play more minutes. But I don't know. I really like watching Alicia Clark play. There was one sequence where she like accidentally stepped out of bounds and the ref called it, and she's like, oh, you saw that? Like, I was hoping you would have missed that. But yeah. Good
Alicia
times
Clark
with Alicia Clark.
Yeah. Alicia Clark,
vibes.
Yes, vibes. Top 5 player expressions in the league for me, just because she's always not necessarily gesticulating, but when she does gesticulate, it's a sight to behold.
Yeah. And then just a little love for Shakira Austin moving off the ball, which remains my favorite thing about her, which is a crazy thing to say considering how good she is defensively. Just love when she cuts into open spaces. She set a ridiculous screen on Sue Bird in this one. He knocked Sue out, and she rolled right to the basket and has an easy finish. It was while Seattle was playing one of their zones, and I guess nobody called it out because it's screening against the zone, so it was weird action. But just never stops moving, always finds a way to make the defense think a little bit because she just has the knack for knowing where the ball is going to be. It's just a really impressive thing to have for a rookie.
My goodness, she had a highlight block in this game. But for the most part, I think the Storm kind of tried to target her early. She seemed very frustrated, got a bunch of early fouls. Ultimately, didn't matter. She played close to, I think, 20, 26, 27 minutes, something like that. And efficient from the field, 3 for 4. Couple of amazing drop-offs by Natasha Cloud, just, leaving it on a plate for her. Yeah, Shakira just, don't want to really talk about like rookie of the year stuff, but the level of like two-way impact that Shakira brings for a playoff team is, it's something.
Our official step through ballot is going to have some talking about rookie of the year.
Yeah, it's true. I guess, unless you have anything major, I just want to talk a little bit about the Mystics defense. The Mystics defense, who, saw a bunch of these Seattle sets. One of the pet sets Seattle has is Breanna Stewart set this sort of, hard to say this is a flex screen because it's on the strong side, but it's this flex-ish screen so she can post up. Washington has it scouted because Elena is fronting here. They know that Sue Bird is going to loosen all the way to the opposite corner. So Alicia Clark stays under the rim just in case that over the top pass is thrown in. They move the ball around and then they converge onto Breanna Stewart to get the ball out of her hands in the post. And then Ezi Magwagor travels or gets called for travel. On this one, more flex action, super fascinating because I texted this to a couple of coaching friends and they said that this is a great way to stop the flex action, but it requires a level of communication. So Breann January comes down and sets this flex screen for Steph Talbot. What Rui Machida and I think Shatori Walker-Kimbrough do here is they double tag, which is to say that they obstruct the cutters without switching. So here Rui is on Breann January. Rui tags Talbot and returns onto Breann and is able to sort of take away that action. Eventually, Ezi is able to hit this insane shot over Elena Deladon, but these are the type of shots that the Mystics were giving up rather than, the other stuff. Here, I talked about this earlier. This is the one of the two possessions they went back to back running. The Seattle and Washington ran the same set. Jewel Lloyd sets this ram screen for Ezi and then sets the back screen in the Spain action. But if you watch the defense, what they're going to do is take all of this away without switching. So it's a lot of help and recover stuff while taking away the passing lanes. And then it ends with this side pick and roll where I don't want to be mean to Steph Talbot, but she has to burp up a turnaround jumper in the post over Ariel Atkins. And then the last one, it's the big three of Seattle, right? You can see here, Breanna Stewart has the ball up top in delay action. Elena Deladon is on her. Sue looks like she's going to set a flare screen for Jewel. Tasha Cloud indicates that if Jewel comes off the flare, that they should switch it. But Jewel turns right around and comes back for a dribble handoff. Natasha Cloud works defensively. She fights over the top to take the handoff away. And then Breanna Stewart ends up handing the ball to Sue Bird because it's basically a double screen. Natasha Cloud hedges so she can switch. And, eventually Sue Bird loses the ball a little bit, is in a scramble. And then, the Stewie Sue Bird connection does not work out, turns out to be a turnover. But that just should tell you Washington is ready. They're prepared. They're a hell of a defensive team. And they just never stop coming. So,
yeah, the more I think about it, I really have no idea who their best defensive player is.
I think for the sake of living in DC, that it's Natasha Cloud because she's
for the sake of living in DC.
No, but
Natasha's gonna come for you otherwise.
I feel like she's come for people for a lot less. No, but just because she quarterbacks the defense with her voice. And I think she is a great organizer, both offensively and defensively. And she really wants to mess you up defensively if you give her the chance to. So there's that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm usually of the belief that like the back line matters so much more. And Shakira has been awesome all year. Elena, like, just isolation wise is so impressive with her ability to stay with anyone, even though you would just never consider Deladon the quickest player alive. Alicia Clark, I believe, has been in Defensive Player of the Year consideration before when she was on Seattle. She just does love everything, but like now she doesn't have to because Ariel Atkins and Natasha Cloud can take all the toughest perimeter assignments. It's just a very impressive collection of talent that they have there, and it all works together quite well.
Washington, they're just going to drag you into the mud and never let you out. And I believe, they've racked up wins over the best teams in the league, even at full strength. So, I think they're the team with the biggest upside that are outside of the top three.
Yeah, speaking of playoff matchups that I really want to see, Washington Vegas is right at the top of my list because that 2019 series is one of my favorite of all time. And I think that this is the group that's going to make the Aces work the most. And I just want to see what they have in them because it's been a really impressive season for Kelsey Plum, really impressive season for Jackie Young. And obviously, Asia Wilson atop all of our, or not, maybe not atop, but like at the very top of all of these MVP, Defensive Player of the Year ballots, all WNBA. She's in consideration as much as anyone else. I'd love to see what Becky Hammon does, as a coach in the playoffs, and we know what the Mystics can bring. So yeah, that's what I'm rooting for. If we can get like a 1-4, 2-3 or something between Vegas and Washington, that would be ideal.
Okay. So hypothetically, if the standings don't change, Vegas is a 2 and Washington is a 5.
So I'd have to be finals.
Yeah. Okay. That's a shame.
I mean, that'd be a great finals.
Yeah, but I would love to. I mean, personally, I would love to see. I'm not rooting against the Aces, but I want to see them have a really challenging run just because, like, as a coach, I want to see what the different things that they can get thrown. So, yeah, it's going to sound like I'm rooting against the Aces.
Phoenix, Seattle, Washington.
Hey.
What a path.
As long as it's not Chicago, who cares, right? Shout out to the great Steve Jones Jr. Yeah. So are you looking forward to anything this week? More Sparks games?
Don't do this to me. It's not nice. I am looking forward to as much chaos as possible in this 6-way morass for the final 3 playoff spots. There was a Twitter account, ENFP Dream Fan, put together a scenario where we could end up with a 6-way tie for those last 3 playoff spots. So yeah, I'm rooting for that exact outcome. That's what I'm looking forward to, without knowing which 3 teams would advance to the playoffs in that scenario.
I mean, the more chaos, the better.
The more
right?
chaos possible.
Yeah. So I mean, I'll have the tweet up and I'll link to the tweet. But I believe it was something along the lines of like the Liberty have to go 5-2 against specific teams. Yeah. And then, the Sparks just have to go 4-3, I believe, is what that tweet said. So do you think that can happen?
We'll see how they do against New York.
Okay. Yeah. Don't have any idea what we're going to do for game of the week just because we continue to talk about it's probably not going to be a Storm game, to be honest with you.
I hope so. We really should do something else. Maybe we'll actually get a game that's excellent between these bottom 6.
Yeah. Maybe.
I tried to speak it into existence with Sparks Mercury last week and it did not work.
No, it did not. Yeah, I guess we'll see where we're at. But if you have any playoff questions, things you want us to answer.
We were supposed to answer a question.
Oh, that's right.
Someone did ask us where we have Tanisha Wright in the Coach of the Year discussion. I think she's top 3 for me, but I still have James Wade as number 1 just because of how Chicago has improved since winning a championship. The seamless integration of Emma Mieseman, what he's been able to get out of Rebecca Gardner, moving Ashley Stevens to the bench and still having her be effective, like all really challenging things. Coaxing an all-time great season out of Candace Parker too. Like, other than, a really bad first quarter of the Commissioner's Cup final, which incidentally does not count in the Coach of the Year voting, I think Chicago has just been really well prepared for everything that's come their way this season. They've executed so well. Their clutch ratings are just freaking outstanding. I just think Chicago has been the most impressive team top to bottom, and I give a lot of that credit to James Wade. Just battling that repeat hangover has got to be really tricky, considering no team has ever repeated in the last 20 years of the WNBA. So I put James Wade atop there. Tanisha and I think Becky Hammon would probably be my 2 and 3. I'm not entirely sure what order.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I survey a bunch of people who I think they should have votes. But as far as I understand, they do not. It's that thing that you said once about All-Star, where it's once you have them in, it's harder to it's harder for other candidates to break in. Or similarly, like once you have them in a certain ranking, it's hard to dislodge them. I just think at this point, and I'm not saying she doesn't deserve it or anything. God, I sound like such an Aces hater this week. That Becky Hammon has been like written in pen by most people as like winning coach of the year because of their hot start. And I would be curious to see, like, I do think James Wade and Becky Hammon are two of the top three. I think Tanisha Wright has done a terrific job. I wonder how this recent slide will affect where she finishes.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, I had her number 3, I think. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So we will actually answer your questions if you send them to us.
Yeah.
If you stick around until the very end of the podcast.
Yep. M. Adler asked questions, but until M makes it onto your other podcast, there will be no question answered. Anyway.
If you are interested in more WNBA content, though, I do have, as Evan mentioned, a podcast on Swish Appeal called Whiparound that comes out every week, and also had a heavy Sparks discussion on my nominally Lakers podcast this week, too. So that's a good dive into how the Sparks have ended up where they are.
It sounds healthy. It sounds very healthy.
I had a great time with it.
That's good. Yeah. Glad somebody in LA is having a good time. Oh, are there any awards races that you think are still in the balance that could swing?
I think Shakira has a chance to pull ahead in Rookie of the Year just based on if Atlanta, like, I don't know, turns it off at the end of the season. Most improved player, I think, is Jackie Young's. Like, I don't really see anybody challenging her there. Sixth woman, I also think is kind of an open and shut case. But MVP, the big one, I think that is very much still, like, could go a number of ways. Okay, I think it could still go 2 ways, MVP. And I am very interested to see how that plays out.
Okay, well, be on the lookout for that. Hoping for a 6-way tie as always. But yeah, we will see you when we see you in the next episode. Bye.